I used, let me show you kind of how I did this. So if you are a stamper and you're new to watercolor or you're new to all of it, it's just such a wonderful thing. I used this stamp. It's the Big Blooms Hollyhocks. It's from Tailored Expressions. This is the stamp, and I used it here and here. So what I did was I took, and I'll show you real quick. I'm not going to ink this up, but what I did is this is called a Misty. It's a stamp press. Hi, Edith. And what I did is I put this stamp of, here's the blank one that this is what we're going to watercolor. But what I did is I put this blank stamp right here. I put this stamp right here. And then the cover will hold on to the stamp. I can ink this image up and then stamp it here. And then once that image is stamped like this, then I can turn it around and stamp this image. And then I get this really nice watercolor panel that once I'm done painting, I can put another sentiment on here. It could be for wedding, it could be for a baby, it could be for a happy birthday, it could be for a friend that needs encouragement. That's what I did. And so it's really open-ended, and you can do that with a lot of different floral stamps, and that's a fun way to stamp. The other thing, and so that's how I made this panel with the stamps. And then with this one, I'll show you the stamp because it's kind of the same. It's not really the same process, but I had to stretch my stamp. And so this is also a cling stamp. And so I take this off of the carrier and I use archival an archival ink, and I'll stamp. You can see how I stamped it right like that, but it doesn't cover. So what I did was then I just moved my card, and then you can kind of see where the line is right here. But once I put watercolor on it, you can't tell where I stopped and where it ended. So it really works well. And then when I'm ready to assemble, I'll just cut this part off, the white part off. And then I have a really nice card base for that. And I might put a sentiment here. I might put some birds on here. You know, it's whatever I decide. But that's how I did that. It's just I stamped it, then I moved it way over this way, and I stamped it again, and got the two images for one. And you could have done it, you know, this way and gone the whole length of the card, but I wanted to have the sunset, the vibrant sunset, so that's what I chose to do. Yeah. If you have questions about where I got the stamps or how to get stamps, I don't know how familiar you guys are with stamps. They can be expensive. I find this one I got at like a big box store, so Michael's or Hobby Lobby, and it was like part of their summer collection, and so I just picked them up for, I don't know, $5. And I also painted this one with this stamp. This is the stamp right here, and I just did a YouTube tutorial on this using different blues, and that is just on YouTube if you wanted to look at that on my channel. But anyways, let's get started painting. If you have any questions, I'm all ears. I promise I will answer them. I hope you guys are enjoying this wonderful day. We are experiencing cool weather here in Iowa, and it's been really nice actually because it's been really hot. I will go ahead and put this right here so you see what I'm doing. What I'm going to start with for this one is I'm going to do what I call wet onto wet negative painting. So I know where I want my greens at. I want it to be kind of green over here. And I'm starting with this one first because this one is a little bit more detailed. And wherever I think I want some pigment is where I am going to paint. I don't want pigment right there. So I'm going to, and this is just the first wash that's going to kind of make it, we're going to make it, it's going to become its own piece of work. But so I'm just adding water on, and this is a great way to, I think, practice water control. I'm going to start with that. There's enough water. You can kind of see the sheen where I put the water. Anywhere where you can see the light reflect, that's where the water is. So you can tell that there's no water on the floral, just the background. All right, and I'm going to start with I'm going to use a little bit of sap green, which is right here, and a little bit of this green gold. I want it to be, and there's already green on my palette, which probably meant I mixed, it looks like green gold and some phthalo blue. So I'll go ahead and add a little bit more phthalo blue. It doesn't matter. I just like to play with my greens. Greens are, playing with your greens really help you become a really good artist, because using green straight out of the tube, it's not a natural green. It's always, we always have to add red to mute it down, or blue to intensify the green, in my opinion. We all have our different loves of green, but you can just see how the water color just whooshes on the paper. And that's what I want. I want a nice light whoosh factor on the paper. And I think that's a leaf, so I'm just going to cover that. We'll go back in, and you can see that I go back in. I probably spend about 3 layers of green around here. And it will dry a little bit lighter. I'm going to need some more watercolor. Yeah. So, and this is called negative painting. I enjoy negative painting. There was a time in my younger days that I did not enjoy negative painting, but I see, I'm going to add a little bit more phthalo blue. I see the merit in negative painting. And I'm going to add a little bit more darker here, because I know I want this part to be pretty dark. And we might as well get our darks in soon. I always like to paint with some good music and just get lost in the painting process. So anyways, okay, that looks good. Oftentimes I will have 2 paintbrushes on hand. One is with pigment. This one has my green pigment. This one just has clean water. And I do that because I don't want to waste the pigment that I just got on my brush, but I want to use it. So I'm going to add water here. And it looks like I need to clean my brush a little bit more. Happens. And it just takes practice to know how much pigment and you can always go darker, but you cannot, with watercolor, you can't go lighter. So that's why I start with a pretty light wash and then go darker. And if you're an oil or pastel, well, sometimes pastel artists will go dark and then light. I have found that working with pastels, I still go light to dark, but I think that's because I like to watercolor. But with watercolor, it's very transparent, so you have to work light to dark. Okay, we have that down, and I think that looks pretty good. I could go in a little bit. There's my phthalo blue, and again with my sap green, and then I'm just going to dab in where I think I need it to be darker. That way, I just have it, and it gives it a nice look to it. And then we're going to go back in with a different color called Cascade Green, and that's going to really bring the greens back to life. That's how you're getting all these beautiful different colors in the painting. This is just what I would call an underpainting. And yes, it might seem like a lot of work for a watercolor card, but if this is more for you to enjoy painting, then, you know, I say it's worth it. All right, now let's go into the floral part of it. And I did a very light yellow. I'm going to use this quinacridone gold is a very pretty warm yellow. And I do the center first. And then, like I said, with my clear brush, my clean water brush, I'm going to go in and I'm going to drag that color away from the flower petals, almost like it's growing. Like you're growing the flower with the water. That's the best way. And then we're going to use that wet onto wet technique again. And we'll add a little bit of red in the middle of it. But this is just to get color onto the flower. I'm going to do this. I'm going to let that kind of sit and mingle on its own for a second. And I'm going to work on this one too. And again, I want to pull that color out. And I know I'm going to need some more yellow, but at least I have the water on so it can kind of do its thing. I also, when I'm painting florals, I always have my tip. I have the tip of my brush at the center and I'm moving out. I hope that makes sense. So like if I'm painting this floral, my tip is always going, the paintbrush is facing me. When I'm painting the further away, the opposite petals, my tip is going the opposite way. And that's just good brush handling. You don't have to, but I find that the results, once they're dry, it really does make a difference. Okay, I'm going to go in with a tiny bit of alizarin crimson. And I'm going to mix that with my yellow, just a tiny bit. It's not going to be a whole lot, but I just want a little bit of this peachy orange color to break through, just to give it a little bit more depth. And I'm looking to see if I need to finish anything off. I think I did pretty good. Sometimes you want to use your water to just spread that pigment around, but I feel pretty confident in that. I am going to wet this a little bit. And if you are wanting to paint along, I will show you a way that I like to paint flowers like this without line drawings, because that's never fun to not be able to paint along. Oh, so pretty. And then you can go in later and add even more detail to it. I'm going to now just clean off this brush, add some more of this Quin Gold. And I'm just going to almost just make a wash. And that's probably too much gold, but that's okay. We'll make it work. And I love adding pigment on top of colors. That's called glazing. And I missed a spot. Because the yellow, the Quin Gold just pops everything. And I see that I need a little bit of green down here. And we'll get that. Okay, there's that. I'm going to let that dry. Just let it dry completely. And then we'll come back and add some more to it. Yeah. And I think I'll add a little bit of yellow here and here just to give it some interest. And if I do it here, then I should probably do it up here as well. I think I ran out of yellows in my yellow color. And my this is a wash, though my brush is fairly wet with like a, I would call it a tea-like consistency. It's pretty, it's not milky or buttery. It's pretty washed out. There's a lot of water in the pigment. If you're curious about the water to pigment ratio. All right, I'm going to let that be. It's already coming together, and then we'll come back and we'll add the darker greens, and I think we'll be very pleased with it when we're done. But I want it to be pretty dry before I start. So I'm going to clean this up real quick, and I always use a, what I'm using here, this is, yard sign boards that it's just white and it's not been printed on. You can get them at your local print shop, and I just have, they come in a sheet. I cut them in fourths. I just have the printer cut them in fourths, and then I have 4, and then I just use them over and over again, and they wipe up nice, they're clean. And that's what I use probably 90% of my time. I either use this or I'll use a towel and just have my paper on a towel or on a washcloth, and then paint. But either way, that's how I use it. But I think with cards, it's nice to have this because I can mix the color right on here too. Anyways, and then I still have my washcloth to keep my brushes perfect for the water to pigment ratio. Okay, sunrises and sunsets. My advice is always to have in your mind what your sunset wants, what you want your sunset to look like. Do you want it more cool? Do you want it more warm? Do you want your sunset, you want the lines to be more horizontal or diagonal? And if you're not sure, take some time and just look at sunsets or sunrises. Look at pictures on the internet, look at different sunsets on different seasons, warmer weather. So summer weather, you're going to have those warmer hues. In the wintertime, you're going to have vibrant, cool colors. So like a cool red and a cool yellow mixed in with some really beautiful cerulean blues because of the cooler air. So take some time and really study some sunsets, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how much more vibrant your sunsets really can be. So with that in mind, let's get started. And I like to start the lightest value, which is yellow, to the darkest value on the color wheel, which is purple. So, and then we can't mix yellow and purple together because you'll get like a mud or neutral color. So what we want to do is kind of have a buffer in between, and that's where the pink comes in. And the pink or the red will be that buffer. So you can still see the purple with the pinks and the reds, but you don't necessarily need to see the purples with the yellows. And that is what's so much fun. So what I'm going to do with this one, I also, if you notice, I also have some iridescent qualities in, and I will show you what I do with that. I will actually just sprinkle it in once I'm ready. But to start, I'm going to do another, I would call it this wet onto wet. I'm just getting the paper pretty wet. I like to wet my paper for a couple reasons. One is I don't want like cauliflowers or water blooms, however you call it. I call them water blooms. And sometimes they're not too bad with the skies, but I also like to be able to have the freedom of just seeing the colors mingle on the paper, and the colors will mix and mingle better on the paper when it's wet, in my opinion. You might find a different opinion from somebody else, and that's quite all right. But for me, that's what I like. All right, I'm going to use that same yellow, and I'm going to just add it right here, really bold. And we're going to go diagonal. I think we'll go this way. But for now, I want the gold to be really, really beautiful, just like that. And then I'm going to take that same red, that alizarin crimson with the quin gold, a little more gold than red, and I'm just gonna add a little bit, and now I'm gonna add even more red because that red's gonna mix and mingle with that yellow, and it's gonna look really pretty. And I will often tilt my paper one way to another just so I can see how the water works. And I think I'm going to do that right now. And then this is where my my towel and my washcloth comes in, because then I can dab this up. And I definitely don't want the yellow up here, because that's where I'm going to have purple. And I know that yellow and purple make a neutral, which is not necessarily what I'm looking for. So we're going to go with that. And now I can add a bit more red here. And I'm actually just going to own it and say, okay, red, there's your spot. And now I can go back in and add a little bit of purple right here, right here. And I'm even going to use a little bit of this blue. That's going to tie in a bit more. This is cerulean blue. And one thing about painting sunsets is, even if you feel like you got it all wrong, no one's going to know because it's all in your mind. Your brain, at least my brain, and I know there's some scientific proof to it, but I couldn't tell you where to look. But your brain will pick up memories that are the most important. And usually if you are studying sunsets, there'll be a sunset in your mind that you're like, oh yeah, that red and blue and purple sunset was just gorgeous. And that's what will come to your mind. And so that's what we paint. We paint, you know, what your mind sees. And so that's what I'm doing. And I know I was thinking this morning, like, okay, what kind of sunset do I remember that I want to paint? And it was, I call it the baseball sunset, because we spend a lot of time in baseball. And the sunsets are always gorgeous on the baseball field. I don't know if it's because it's such a big field and so there's a bit more of a panoramic, but it seems like there's always these blues and purples and just gorgeous. I'm coming in here. I'm just adding a little bit more red. I want the red to be a bit more dramatic. And so that's what I'm doing right now. I do want this to be pretty dark, so I'm going to add. I'm pretty bold with my colors when it comes to sunsets. And I wasn't going to add a deeper or vibrant orange, but I think I'm going to. This is Pyrrole Orange. And it's just beautiful. And I think I just need a little bit of orange right here. Now, I don't love this line, so I'm going to keep my orange on my brush, but I'm going to take this clean brush and I'm going to bleed it into the red. And I can, because it's still wet. And remember, I like to move my paper around a lot. And then I'm going to lean that into the yellow a little bit, move my paper around. I'm going to let that sit. I'm going to add one more. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of blue. It's a pretty light wash. Hopefully you can kind of see the blue. Okay. And my camera always looks different than in real person, but I'm just going to go over a tiny bit with that purple just to kind of blend it. Now, because I love iridescent quality paints, this is we call it a petal palette. It's ceramic. And I put my iridescent colors, they're all from Daniel Smith, in this palette in a somewhat of a color wheel. These are my warms, because I use a lot of golds and warms in my painting. But I'm going to use this pearl color right here. And I often use my pearl with this green, so that's why it's together. It doesn't matter. Whatever works for you is the right way. This works for me, so that's the right way for me. And so I have some on my brush. You can see that iridescent quality a little bit on my brush, and it's pretty wet, and I'm just gently tapping it. I don't know if it's going to pick up on the camera, but when I'm done, it's going to dry, and it's going to just give this magical atmospheric look, and you'll have something that looks like this. Now, what I could do, this is pretty vibrant right now. It's going to dry a little bit lighter. So I'm going to add in some more of this purple and red, and that will just kind of solidify the gorgeousness of the sunset. And then hopefully when it's all done, we will have this gorgeous sunset. And I already did the hard work of adding my water, so I'm just gonna intensify some of the colors. I'm not intensifying all the colors, but just a little bit. And it will just bleed out. I don't like a lot of hard edges for sunsets. I like a lot of soft edges. And then I might even go in with my orange because I like this really bright yellow, but I'm not loving this this reddish color that we have going right here. So I'm just gonna glaze over that color and pick up. And then we have a much more vibrant, dramatic sunset that, I don't know, in Iowa, we get these sunsets all the time. Usually it's after a thunderstorm or it's right before a thunderstorm, and they're just so gorgeous and it's backlit. It's just so much fun to see. So anyways, that's the easy sunset, and you can make 100. I will sit down for an afternoon and make I'll stamp the card panels first. That'll, you know, let's say in the morning or the day before, and then I'll just sit down and in an hour or two, I can paint 20 sunsets and have 20 different cards ready to go for birthdays, weddings, anniversaries. I think having a baby, this could totally work for a baby, you know, card, like all these different occasions. And it's just one simple card that can be used for lots and lots of different ways. So that's, and then it's fun to just play with color. And I'm much happier after I'm done playing with colors. So there you go. And once it's dry, again, I will show you what it looks like. But that is that. Okay, let's go back in. You can kind of, it's dry now. I can touch it. It's not going anywhere. Yes, it's a little warped, so I will bend it a little bit just so it'll stay kind of flat. But I don't really care that it's warped a little bit. Once I put it onto a card panel, I'll glue the back of this with some double-sided tape or some mounting tape, and then stick it on my card panel, and it won't look warped. It'll stay stuck onto the card panel. So
Hey,
I'm
Lisa,
not worried about the wrap. Yes.
can you say what is the paper that you're using?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I am using Canson 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. And I cut it down to an A2 size. So this is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. If you wanted a border, you would just, I always take off 1/4 of an inch on each side. So then it's 4 inches by 5 1/4 inch.
Great, thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Okay, you guys, this is my favorite color green. It's called Cascade Green. It's by Daniel Smith. It's worth every penny. It's you can't buy it anywhere else, and it has well, I'll show you the qualities of it before I start painting, because you're not going to see all the qualities because there's already an underpainting. So here's a scratch piece of paper. And if you have not done this with your watercolors, if you have tube watercolors, I highly recommend putting a dot on your sheet. You can already tell that there's different colors in this. I just love this pigment. It's made with, let's see, 1, 2, 3 different colors. But when you paint them together, they separate and they're just gorgeous. So, and I do this with a lot of my paints. I learned this from Jean Haynes has a book called Everyday Watercolor. No, that's not right. Jean Haynes is Watercolor World. And so she mentions to just take a piece of watercolor paper and just let this bleed. And I just love the quality. You can see when it dries, you can see the turquoise and the green, and there's some raw sienna. You can kind of see, it's hard to show on the camera, but there's some turquoise right here, and it just makes for a beautiful, beautiful green. And it's granular, so you get some texture. It's just, in my opinion, it's worth every penny. It's just my favorite. And if you follow if you follow me on the watercolor card group, a couple people have mentioned how much they love this pigment as well. So, and you could make a background just like that and stamp something or doodle something on it, and that would look so pretty. So play with your pigments. But I wanted to show you that because look at that. There's that turquoise that's running down right there. Yeah, see that turquoise? Oh, it's just gorgeous. I wouldn't have planned it that way. It's just so pretty. And that's what we're hoping to do here. But I want to leave this area pretty light green for the sentiment. So, and because I don't know yet what kind of card I'm using, I can do that. If you already have your sentiment, then you know how far, you need to go down, but I don't, and that's okay.
Lisa, we have a question.
Yes, what's your question?
Do you have any problems with the stamp putting ink on the paper unevenly because of the roughness of the watercolor paper?
I do. Do you have a Misty? I do have that problem. I use cold press because I love the texture of the watercolor paper with the watercolor. With the stamp, I usually have to stamp. I use my Misty. The reason why I have a Misty, and I know they're kind of expensive, is because this is magnetic, so I could put my paper down, put my stamp on, ink it, stamp it, and then I can move this around it and it's not going anywhere, and then I can ink it again and stamp it until I get a nice crisp clear line. I will say not every stamp is created equally. The reason why these are so cheap is because they don't have that foam. The red rubber is the stamps that I prefer. And I am a stamp snob, so I really almost always buy stamps that have this red rubber and then this foam, because it gives it a nice clean impression, and I don't usually have to ink it twice unless it's a big stamped area, which I do have some of those, but usually I can just stamp once and it's good. But if you are having troubles, there's another watercolor paper that I love. It's actually mixed media paper, and it's by Strathmore, and it's called Mixed Media Strathmore paper, and it's 90 pounds. And it's smooth. So it's kind of like hot press paper, but it's not that smooth. It's just a nice way to stamp on as well. I hope that helps. Let me know in the comments if that helps, and then let me know if you have a Misty, because if you don't have a Misty, that might be something I would recommend getting if you like to stamp.
Thanks, Lisa.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm getting my Cascade Green right here, and it's just on top of it's just in my palette, and I'm just working in some water, and I would say it's milk-like consistency, so it's a bit darker than the wash we used on the green. And I'm just going to start. It doesn't really matter. I always like to start in the middle. It doesn't really matter. And I feel like this is like the most like the hardest part of the whole part is this negative painting with the darker color. But I promise you it works. It's just having that little bit of faith of, okay, I can't mess this up. I don't know. Okay. I'm going to stop there. I don't want this hard line, right? So I might have to scrub it a little bit. I should have had it a little bit wetter, but that's okay. I'll add more of this to feather it down. And then just like that, I have that perfect edge. However, I don't necessarily want, I don't want it to be super diagonal, so I'm going to add some more color down this way. And then to pop out this shape, I'm just going to negative paint this part right here. So then the floral will pop and so will the stem. And then if you really want to get into it, you could go in and add some more green shading to the leaves. I don't, because it's a card and I don't normally have the time to do that. And it's still like, it's one of those things where if it was like, if I knew someone was going to frame it, maybe I would spend a little bit more time on it, but I don't know who's going to get this card. So I am just using my good design skills to make the best out of my time. And it's supposed to be fun. If it's not fun, don't do it. And for me, there's nothing more relaxing than painting with paint. All right, I'm going to go back in, add a little bit more pigment. And you see that I got the yellow a little bit. I'm just going to clean that up with my brush. And now I don't see that green anymore. Ha, ha, ha. And then I can go in and just add that, blend it into the background. Negative painting does take a while. Like I said, sometimes it's a pain in the butt, but it's always worth it. I have never felt like, oh, I can't believe I spent an hour negative painting and nothing came from it. It always helps your painting. And with watercolor, I don't think you can get away from it. It's just part of watercolor. I also try to not outline, and I know I just did, but if you can get away from outlining, your cards will, your negative painting will definitely look a bit more professional. But it's hard when you're working with a small space. Now, I could use a smaller brush, but with a smaller brush means you don't get as much pigment on in your brush. And with negative painting, you want as much pigment as you can get before you have to dip your brush back in, because the time it takes to load back your brush, it could, dry, or I don't know. It's just easier to have a bigger brush size, because then you're not constantly going back and reloading your brush. Because if I had to use a small brush, it would take me twice as long. There we go. I really like that. It's going to dry a little bit lighter. So with this one, the third coat, I had to do a little bit more here and a little bit here, and I left that alone. The other thing that I did not do, that I always like to do, is, now that we spent all this time not getting green in here, I will often just kind of bring in a tiny bit of green into the white, so it's not so stark. Because in the nature, like, your whites are never white. They're always a little green. So why not bring in just a tiny bit of green in? When I say a tiny bit, I mean like you can barely tell, but it's there. The person who's looking at it isn't going to notice, but it just makes the whites not so stark. And I'm actually going to add a little bit of that yellow to it. You don't want to, this, I mean, just a tiny bit, a little bit goes a long ways. And then I'll just bleed it out a little bit so it doesn't even look like it's just part of the painting. It's just part of the artist eye. Look, but I can already tell that I need a little bit darker in here. So I'm going to go ahead and use, this is a dry brush. I would call this dry brush. It's definitely not super wet. Yeah, this is a dry brush. And I'm just going to go back in and I'm going to outline a little bit. That just kind of pops that floral out. And I always like to have two of my corners a little bit darker. Anyways, you could spend hours on negative painting. I'm not going to. And then I see this like little line that I don't like, so I'm gonna let that go. And then over here as well, I'm just gonna add a little bit darker pigment to it. And then I'm gonna call it done. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I'm just fussing with this before it gets too bad. But I know when to stop, and that's half the battle. I know when to stop because I painted this lots and lots of times. So the first time you paint a watercolor card and you stamp it or draw it, it never turns out quite right. But by the third or fourth time, it's like, I know what I'm doing. So there you go. There's the two florals. Here's this one is almost dry. It's not completely dry. That's the first wash that I did. And so it's turning pretty good. This is the second wash on the, and you can kind of see the difference between the two. This one has a bit more saturation than this one, but still really pretty. And I think that I think they both are going to look beautiful as a card. I will cut off this part and then mount it onto a card base. And so with that, all I would do is stamp another sentiment. This is a sentiment from Tailored Expressions as well, and it's that red rubber with the foam on it, and it has a nice imprint. I think I had to ink it up twice to get it so black, but that was also because I'm stamping on top of the pigment and the paper. So anyways, I hope that helps you guys. I feel like I talked and talked and talked and didn't leave any time for any conversation. But I'm here if you guys have any questions.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's open it up for discussion. If everyone would like to unmute themselves, and if you have questions or want to, let Lisa know what you think of her greeting cards and how she created them, that would be wonderful.
And if you don't, that's quite all right too. I do have some card classes and some free demos on the Fine Art Cafe Academy that everything I know, I put in those lessons. I don't leave anything on the table for guesswork. And if you have questions, I'm an open book. I want to see artists succeed. I want to see beginners play with their pigment. It's all about creativity for me, and the process, not as much about the other things that go along. So I am an open book. I like to be honest, and I like to share my love of creativity and watercolor with you guys. So if you have questions, let me know.
Yeah, let's give the web address for the Academy. It's thefineartcafe.academy. So instead of .com, it's .academy. It's thefineartcafe.academy. If you type in your search, just the Fine Art Cafe Academy, it should pop up. We usually do.
Mm-hmm.
So, does anybody have any questions?
I haven't.
Hi, Betty.
Hello. I haven't any questions. I followed it completely. Thank you.
Oh, it's all good. Do you stamp?
No, I've never done it, but so it's interesting from that point of view. I do cards, but I use my watercolors and use the computer,
Yeah.
um, Photoshop for the print, the lettering, and so on.
Well, you could easily draw this and use it as a pin and wash technique too. If you like to draw, I mean, I've drawn hollyhocks before and they always turn out beautiful. And so you could do the
Yes.
same technique, with your drawings.
Yeah, I do use pen and wash. I can do that. Yeah, but it's interesting. You can do it much more quickly with a stamp ready-made, can't you?
Yeah. Well, it makes it nice if you're going to send a bunch out to friends or if you want to make a. I have.
Doing an invitation or something. Yeah, good
Yeah.
idea. But
Yeah.
anyway, I've learned a lot. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And thanks for spending, well, my afternoon. I'm not sure if it's afternoon where you're at, but
No,
thanks for
it's
spending.
dinner time. It's 10 to 7, 10 to 8 at night.
Oh, well, thanks for spending your dinner time with me.
Yes, my husband's got the barbecue on. We're just about to eat.
Yum. I hope you're cooking something yummy that we just had.
So do I. I don't know what he's doing. I'll leave it to him. Yeah. Anyway, I'll see you all again sometime.
Yes,
Well,
thank you, Betty.
Thank you, Betty.
Yeah.
Nice seeing you or talking with you again.
Yeah, thank you. I follow everything that comes up, as a brush show, that.
Yeah. And if anybody here is not on the Brusho Fun group on Facebook, please request to join. And Brusho is the main art medium that we use within the group, and it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of tutorials on the Academy with Brusho. So, and it's just do a search for Brusho, BRUSHO Fun on Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going now. Bye.
Bye.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Those are very pretty. Thank you, Lisa.
Oh, you're very welcome. And again, if you're trying this and you have some questions, send me an email or send Jen an email and she'll send it to me. Comment on the Brusho Fun group or on the watercolor card group. It's all good to us. However you can reach me, I will respond.
And we'll get this recording up if anybody wants to watch it again on the Fine Art Cafe Academy YouTube channel. And also I'll send it over to Lisa and she can get it up on the Academy, and it'll be up there to watch.
That'd be perfect.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much.
You were
Unless
welcome.
somebody else has a question or you have any more to add, Lisa.
I don't. I meant to do something with Brusho, but we'll do that next time. I promise. But you could definitely do for sunrise. I actually had my Brushos out. I just forgot to use them. I was going to use New Gamboge and alizarin crimson. Those are my two favorites for sunsets. And then for the purple, I was going to use violet.
Oh, pretty.
Are my favorite colors to use for a sunset. And then green for the yellow, because I like a little bit of green on the bottom for Brusho. I don't know why, it's just a thing.
I think with Brusho, just like watercolor, you find certain colors you really love and certain ways of using them.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Well, again, thank you everybody for watching, and thank you, Lisa, for doing the live presentation.
You are very welcome. We'll talk to you guys soon.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.